Well, I'm really honored today to be here with Jeannie Tarkenton, who's CEO and founder of Funding You, a merit-based fintech startup right here in Atlanta that's helping students find better ways to finance college. I think we're going to have a really great conversation talking about the startup space, but as well as student loans in general. So I'd like to start there, Jeannie. Of course, 2020 has been a wild ride for many people, but I'd love to kind of set the scene of what is going on in kind of the state of student loans right now.
Right. Well, let me just acknowledge student loans in and of itself are not a particularly fun topic, particularly if you are a student. So, I think as Funding You, we acknowledge that the need to get last gap funding for school is not fun. It's a necessary tool to get something you really highly value and has good outcomes. So I would say in terms of the larger picture of student loans, there's a lot going on. So, with student debt and that larger picture, which is sort of interchangeable with student loans, new administration is making some very good, the incoming Biden administration has some very good policies and plans that they are positioning to shorten things that are most likely to happen quickly. And that includes something like $10,000 forgiveness for people who have federal student loans very quickly and immediately. And then in an ongoing way, additional work for people who have student loans who graduated from for-profit colleges and felt defrauded by those institutions, that there'll be a lot of work in helping students like that. And then further beefing up federal loan repayment programs by which people who are unemployed or underemployed are given much easier ways to reduce or minimize their monthly payments. So all of that is really good news for student borrowers. That's all federal student loans. And that is what a vast majority of students who have any loans have federal loans. A smaller have the kind of loan we have, which is a private student loan, which is needed after you have maxed your federal loans. Which as an undergraduate maxes pretty quickly. And that is why, for good or for bad, there is additional need in this era. People use loans for all sorts of important things, right? In and of itself, debt can be used well to be a good vehicle to finance something of value. So that's the sliver Funding You is in, is then that last gap piece. And the reason we are unique and the reason there was a pain point in market that brought us into this, or that drove me to found the company, is that when you're seeking that last gap financing, a bank will almost never, down to like about 1% of applicants, provide a loan to a young person who has very little credit, very little income, like most 20-year-olds. So if you're a 20-year-old, if student loans in the private sector are really misnamed, they should be called parent loans, because the fact is you cannot get one unless you have a parent who also has a very good credit score willing to shoulder the debt with you. So students who don't have that, or parents who choose not to do that, are completely locked out of this financial product, this financial solution. So that's where fintech innovation comes in, right? You come in where a customer is not being served. Financial institution is inefficient. The inefficiency here is that traditional credit screening is completely a mismatch for a 20-year-old college student. So it closes the market entirely. So we really, in essence, are a data and analytics company solving the problem of a consumer who can't access credit, to sort of put the lens really wide.
That's great. That's great. And I love that you found an important gap for students who need this support in order to take that next step into college or at the university of their choice. That's great. I'd love to dive in. You spoke about it a little bit, but I'd love to dive into kind of how Funding You, kind of the nuts and bolts, how does it work? How does the algorithm that you have work to help students move forward with their potential financing needs?
Yeah, I'll answer the question straightforwardly, and then we can dig into a little bit of what it's like to be a startup that has, a vision and an idea and a solution. And then as you're entering market, sometimes how you enter in a more focused way than your ultimate broad solution. So let me just step back. Where funding you philosophically is underwriting for the predictive behaviors that a student will graduate. First of all, that's a huge de-risking, historically proven. I do this every day because I care about people I used to come in contact a lot with in my previous jobs, and as a human being. Get up every day because I care about the young person who's low to moderate income who can't graduate, and it's very emotional for me. In fact, the algorithm itself is very agnostic. It's not emotional, right? It's a predictive line of code that first is looking for graduation, because historically, once you hold a college degree, the risk factor of you repaying is reduced, right? So at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is give money to people who will pay it back, right? To take it to its most basic. So then you get into de-risking. You're a 20-year-old, first de-risking factor is you get a college degree. So a large share of our innovation and our inputs, and then the power of what we're showing on our outputs, is what can we see on your transcript that aligns with historic behaviors that are predictive that you will cross the graduation dais. And it is a combination of factors. It is somewhat GPA, but it is not, as you know, we all know, it's not just the A students who get their degree, and it's not just the A students who get jobs. And in fact, historically, there's very little or marginal alignment that says a college student with an A GPA at graduation is in life a more successful person from an economic standpoint. So GPA is a piece of it. So a base level of proceeding through college and having a GPA that is passing, particularly passing in your major. It is actually more predictive how you do freshman and sophomore year. So a higher GPA freshman and sophomore year is highly predictive of graduation, which again, anecdotally might make sense to some people, particularly if you're an engineer and you start to take really difficult classes as a junior or senior. Having a 3.8 GPA is not necessarily have anything to do with you graduating or the job you're going to get. So doing well in school, well enough to put it sort of generally, particularly in core classes in your major, being able to handle a full class load. And there are a lot of, this is where what we do now versus the need versus our products. We right now serve a student who is attending a not-for-profit 4-year university full-time. There are a lot of people who achieve their degree in a different way, and that is additional products that we will look to add. But startups who are small and beginning to be in market need to make certain decisions. That is a subset of borrowers and a data set that was very easy for us to build analytics on top of, because there are a lot of historic data around that kind of student and how they have handled their federal student loans. So we take transcripts, we look at how you are achieving, if you are carrying a full 15 credit hours per semester at a decent GPA. Our GPA measure does change, depend on your freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior. So there's a bit of holistic work in here. A small piece of what we look at are the outcomes of your school. We try as much as we can because it is the best way to de-risk, and it also is what we believe is both most innovative and most useful. The more we can underwrite to the individual, their grades, how they're doing in school. Actually, holding a job in school is highly predictive of graduation and successful employment. And it doesn't matter what job, right? It doesn't matter if it's the fabulous internship at Wells Fargo or it's working at Subway. It has to do with behavioral predictions of balancing, I guess. Actually, I'm intuiting this, but that is a predictor. So we also look at that job experience. And so primarily we're looking at your transcript, but we are also all asking you questions about if you've had a job. Then we do ask you what school you go to and what major you are in. And that is a combination of factors. Some of that is part of the predictive analytics for likelihood to graduate, because some schools have a much higher graduation rate. Again, we use that in combination with what the individual is doing, because there's a fine balance between the cohort, the environmental risk, and the individual. So the more data and analytics we're building is allowing us to do even more of that, to rely less on the school outcomes and more on the borrower. we then want to look at how much you are likely to earn soon after college and do a math formula that compares it to how much debt you will have taken on. So that's just where we're sort of complicated way of saying, when you're a nurse major at Georgia State, and historically that person will have a post-grad income first year out of school of 49,000. And now we look at how much debt you've taken on, both federally and then when you add hours, and we look to ensure that the monthly payments you'll be making for your student loans is manageable within the likely salary you're going to have.
So Atlanta is, of course, a fintech hub. How has it been building this kind of new fintech idea and kind of marrying it with the student debt and student loan crisis here in Atlanta? How has Atlanta played a part in your growth?
So we are headquartered in Atlanta with also a significant amount of our team in New York. So we've had sort of a, one foot heavily in Atlanta and then the other foot in New York, which are very different. As a startup founder, that's been interesting, actually.
Yeah.
But definitely feel very tied to Atlanta, feel very excited and about the cost to run a company here, the resources, we're part of ATDC. So, the wealth of, we employ not only, we have a team of 8 and then we rely on some contractors. So we somewhat have sort of bank people, financial people, but then we also have a lot of data analytics. So that's a very good place for us. We've had a lot of success working either with Georgia Tech to have highly trained employees or also find source skills when we need them. Lending companies in Atlanta aren't exactly known. I mean, fintech in Atlanta is, if you look at the pie, only a teeny tiny sliver of it is lending. So it's not really as compared to New York, where credit and lending companies and fintech innovation around data and analytics for providing credit is a more robust place. So it's been, that's been kind of the trade-off, or not the trade-off, the kind of, it's been good to both be in Atlanta and take all that's advantage. We have the advantages of Atlanta, but to acknowledge that lending fintech is a little bit the redheaded stepchild in Atlanta, and that's great. We're happy to swim, upstream, but definitely have found, a great place to be. So anyway.
Great. And now, as you're looking ahead to 2021, of course, you mentioned there can be some changes on the political perspective of what the landscape will look like, but what is Funding You looking forward to, and what can viewers be on the lookout for?
Yeah, no, you're not. Well, for us, we're at that hit the gas stage moment. For a lending company, there are 2 things: a data and analytics company, which again, I'm coming back to, that's what we are, because really we see ourselves building a data and analytics score that can be used alongside FICO to open credit access to low and moderate income people who otherwise wouldn't get it. So it starts with a student loan, but what we are building is a powerful set of analytics that can be used not just for student loans and potentially not just by Funding You, by which we can really crack open a bit of what would be historically entrenched systems that make it harder for underrepresented, moderate to low income people of color to get the credit they need. I mean, the world really of credit when you're a young person relies on you having a guarantor. So, that's sort of, again, in this world that I think we're getting more comfortable talking about unspoken difficulties, that is something that happens in financial institutions, that there are a lot of people who do have a parent or another adult who can help with that student loan, that first car loan, that first apartment down payment. And if you don't have that, you're behind by a step or 2. So we see our value in helping more and more students. So we've had $500 million in student loan requests since we were founded. Right now we have about 8 million in loans in market. Next year, we anticipate putting about 20 million in loans. So we're really in a scaling position, gotten our analytics to a place where we're comfortable really opening the doors more to more consumers. And also we have relationships now with Goldman Sachs, by which we have a very good partner with whom to scale. So for Funding You, we are in a position where we will, if you're a consumer coming to Funding You, we have more coverage in the United States. So we are licensed, and in 2021, we will add more licenses so that we're at about 90% of the United States. Right now, we're probably in about 75%. So we will have more coverage. And we will have the ability to scale and meet demand. We also will be adding new products in 2021, probably a refinance product, because this pain point continues. I don't know if you're familiar with SoFi or Common Bond or Earnest, but there have been a lot of fintech innovators who focus on refinance, but they still leave it at sort of a 1% sliver, right? Like you have to have gone to a particularly good school. And about 90% of the people who apply to them are rejected. So we will roll out a refi product.